It is 7:01, and I'm going to bring this Macomb Township Zoning Board of Appeals meeting to order. The date is December the 3rd. Again, the time is 7 o'clock, and my name is Aaron Tuckfield. I am the chair of the ZBA. The first item was calling the meeting to order. I'm going to move us on to the second item, which is the Pledge of Allegiance. If you could mute yourself or recite silently so that we can proceed along, I would appreciate it. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Very good. That takes us on to the roll call. I think I'm going to do the roll call again this evening. And after the roll call, we'll introduce staff and go from there. All right, Mr. Piper.
Present.
Mr. DeCoster.
Here.
Ms. Lawson.
Present.
Ms. Posey.
Present.
Mr. Tuckfield is present, and that is a quorum and all members. And I believe for staff on the line tonight, we have Mr. Box. Mr. Box, could you introduce yourself?
Yes, I am Josh Box, the planning director of Macomb Township.
Okay, very good. That's item 3. That'll take us to item 4 with the approval of agenda items. You have the agenda for tonight's meeting in your packet. Is there any discussion on the agenda? Hearing no discussion, I will bring it forward for a vote. Is there any motions on this item?
Motion to approve.
Motion by Ms. Lawson to approve tonight's agenda. Is there support?
I'll second that, DeCoster.
Supported by Mr. DeCoster, and I will call the roll. Ms. Lawson.
Support. Yes. Sorry.
No worries. Mr. DeCoster.
Yes.
Mr. Tuckfield votes yes. Mr. Piper.
Yes.
Ms. Posey.
Yes.
The agenda is adopted. The next item is item 5, the approval of the previous meeting minutes. Those would be the minutes for November the 5th, which was our last regularly scheduled meeting. Is there any discussion on the minutes? Hearing no discussion, I'll open up the floor for a motion. Is there any motions on this item?
I would move to approve. Oh, go ahead, Don.
Nope.
I think that was motion by Mr. Piper, support by Ms. Lawson. That
Perfect.
accurate? Okay, very good.
Yeah.
I'll call the roll then. Mr. Piper,
Yes.
Ms. Lawson,
Yes.
Ms. Posey,
Yes.
Mr. Tuckfield votes yes. Mr. DeCoster.
Yes.
The meeting minutes from the previous meeting are approved. Okay, that takes us on to item 6A, new business. This is a variance request from the zoning ordinance. We have 2 requests here. A request to vary from section 20-6.A.2 and 20-6.A.1. These are both with regards to the surface area or the display area of a signage on a building. And this is for an address along 26 Mile Road, 16224, permanent parcel 0806202004. And the petitioner is Phillips Sign and Lighting. Mr. Box, could you give us, bring us up to speed on this item?
Sure, Mr. Tuckfield. This property is an outlot in the Coover on 26 Mile, just west of Colonial Plank, south of 26, near gas station on one side and a Taco Bell on the other side. This was Chase Bank and is now in the process of becoming a Michigan School Government Credit Union. They are seeking variance for signage on the side and the back of the building. Their ordinance has some restrictions on how large these signs can be, and they are seeking the variance to make them a little bit larger. Some of us have talked about this previously. I think this is a little bit of a unique situation in the sense that it's in a shopping plaza where while it's the back of the building, in many ways it's kind of the front of the building because there are shoppers at the Kroger and other businesses in that strip plaza. I think there's a Subway and a few other establishments there that I think the bank just wants to advertise that it's there. It's obviously a new credit union as opposed to what was there previously. So to make the signs visible from those customers at that plaza, They're seeking to have some larger signage.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Box. Is there any questions for Mr. Box from the board? Hearing none, I'm going to take it to the petitioner. Steve, did you want to speak on this? Is it you and Mike speaking? And if
Yeah.
so, if you could state your name and address for the record and walk us through any comments you might have.
Yes, I will speak first, and Mike is going to speak after me. My name is Stephen Bretz. I'm with Phillips Sign and Lighting. I reside in Macomb Township at 17924 Autumn Lane. And we are here tonight for a variance request for Michigan Schools and Government Credit Union for the 2 building mounted wall signs. The sign on the east side of the building is more appropriate in scale because of the large size of the building. That elevation there is 85 feet. The sign on the south side or the rear side of the building is also more appropriate in scale because of the large size of the building elevation over there, which is like 99 feet. These exceptions shall not adversely impact the character or the appearance of the building, lot, or the neighborhood. And we feel these exceptions shall be the minimum necessary to allow reasonable visibility and readability of the signs. Michigan School and Government Credit Union is very excited to be part of the Macomb Township community, and they look forward to providing many years of service to its citizens. So I'd like to thank you on their behalf tonight for your time and your consideration.
Very good, Steve. Mike, did you have any comments you wanted to add on this? If you could, also please just make sure you have your name and address for the record.
Understood. My name is Mike Blanick. I'm with the firm Stuckey Vitale Architects, 27172 Woodward Avenue in Royal Oak, 48067. We're the project architects for the credit union project here. And I would just add on the east side sign, if you recall from the previous tenant, which was a bank, they actually had their sign in that location as well. It was a little bit longer in length. You know, our sign's a little more condensed, so we're kind of replacing what was there before. So I don't know if there was a variance in the past on that one, but we're basically putting it back in the same spot that was there previously. And then as was described on the rear, you know, we're looking for that visibility because it is an outlot and you have drives around the sides for everybody to be able to know the bank, you know, the credit union's there and they can draw them in, you know, as a future member. As you know, credit unions are member owned. So, and it's nonprofit. So, you know, they're excited to be in the community and look forward to many years of service to the community in Macomb Township. Thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you, Mike. Is there any questions for the petitioner from the board? Hearing none, I'm going to take this out to the public. If there's any members of the public who wish to speak on this item, this would be the time to do so. Please raise your hand digitally if you're on the phone by hitting *9. I believe it's still *9. I think I heard someone say *6, so hopefully it's *9. If you're on the computer, there should be a hand button that indicates that you want to speak. If you do, I will unmute you, and then you can state your name and address for the record and give comments as you might have them. I'm going to give it about 45 seconds here just to give everybody a chance to work their way through technology. It's always fun, especially when we have to throw ourselves into it like this. At this point, I'm not seeing anyone indicating they wish to speak, so I'm going to bring it back to the board. Any questions or comments for Mr. Box or the petitioner?
I do have one, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Mr. Coster.
Being that credit unions are member owned, I guess it would be, I am a member of this credit union, and I'm just wondering if it's a conflict of interest for me to be a participant in this vote.
That is a good question. I believe that our bylaws in the past do state that if you have a direct pecuniary interest, I believe is the term, that it's best to avoid it. I guess I would say if you believe there's a conflict of interest, I think this would be a reasonable place to state it and to refrain from interacting on this item.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, is there any other comments or questions on this item? I do have a couple if there's no other ones. That was, I think I understand the desire by the credit union here. I think it makes sense. I'm also the representative on the planning commission, and one of the things of the planning commission that we've been very much thinking about and trying to encourage is the ability to build outlot buildings in large parking lots. So for example, there's a lot of this going on along our Hall Road where we have a lot of parking lots that are being unused. Try to give people the ability to build in those. If we're encouraging that, rear signage seems like it makes sense. So I think the concept of it makes sense along the rear and along the side. My concern would be, though, in this particular situation, we're governed less by what we want and less by what makes sense than trying to make sure that we follow what our restrictions is, and that is coming up with a practical difficulty. So, Steve, I know you've been, I believe you're with Phillips. I'm sure you guys have done this quite a bit. Do you have anything? Obviously, it makes sense. Do you have anything further that you could give us as far as a practical difficulty in this issue that would meet our requirements in our deliberation here?
Well, I think the way the signs are made, these are identical size signs. They're the same. They're saying exactly the same on both signs. They're like Mike had stated earlier that the signs actually, the sign on the east side is actually smaller than the one that was there previously. Although I don't like to bring up what was there previously. It doesn't really pertain to this, but I know the ordinance states that they are allowed signs on both sides, but one of them I believe is 12 foot in square or 12 foot area, and the other is 4 foot, which to me is, obviously that wouldn't work for the Michigan Schools logo in their name. So just to fit everything with their logo and their name, they obviously would need something along the lines of the size of these in order to send their message out. So.
Mr. Box, and I'm sorry, Steve, I'll let you speak again in a second, but I just want to follow up on something. We've had both of these gentlemen mention that there was an existing sign at that facility on the east side. I'm familiar with the lot. I've been there before. I don't know that I remember the sign. Do you know if we have any history of any other action on this property with regards to variances or anything of that nature? Because that would be a fairly recent building.
I do know that it was a Chase Bank, and I do know that he is correct. There is a sign on the east side of that building that is probably larger than the sign they're proposing. I do not know if there was a variance granted for that or when that was constructed. I believe that property, as you said, is relatively new, probably the last 5 or 6 years that would have been constructed. So it's probably something that I could check on to see if a variance was granted for that other sign.
Dawn, do you remember this by any chance? Because I would feel like we would have both been on ZBA if there was a variance granted for this. I'm trying to remember if there was, and I'm not remembering anything, but 6 years ago was a while. Do you have any memory of that by any chance?
Yeah, no, I do not have a memory of that at all. And I remember most of the signage ones that we've had come before the board. And if it's that recent as far as 5 or 6 years ago, I would definitely remember, especially that facility being where it's located.
Yeah,
so
that
I do not
facility is
remember
fairly close to you,
even
isn't
coming.
it? Yeah.
Oh yeah. So I would have been very aware just, because especially because of how close it is. But so yeah, no, I have no memory of there ever being a variance brought before us or even granted for that.
Okay. All right. Well, my only comment would be, and Steve, actually, before I give my comment, I think you still had something left. Why don't you continue with that? Because I think you had another comment you were going to make, and I kind of cut you off there. So go ahead.
That's all right, and I kind of forgot where I was, but I don't know if you have the drawings that we sent over of what's existing at the site. We've got a drawing of the MSGCU sign, and then at the bottom it says existing at site, and you can actually see the outline of the old Chase sign there, and it is actually quite a bit larger than what we're proposing. But I don't know if you can see it on your drawing.
I cannot on my drawing, but
no. Okay. Yeah, there's like outlines, and there's there's some holes in the building there that kind of show where the signage was.
Was there a sign on the rear of the building?
There was not, to my knowledge, there was not.
Well, then I would, I guess, amend one thing, and that is, and I'm not sure that I feel strongly enough about this to make it a practical difficulty. This is the interesting part of understanding and thinking of these things as we have new information presented to us. But it might be considered a practical difficulty if one was to buy a business in a location with a reasonable expectation that you could put a sign in a location of a certain size and not be able to put a sign of that size in that location. I'm not sure if that applies to the rear of the building, if there was not a sign there, but that might be a pertinent piece of information for that side portion. And I would pair that with the fact that I don't know that I find, not that I don't know, I don't find this request contrary to what I think makes sense, but I do find it in some cases contrary to the ordinance, and we are bound by it to a certain extent. So kind of those two things, 50-50 would be my thoughts on this, and I will take it back to the board for any comments, questions, or motions. With one exception, I think that we need to handle these two separately. Motions made separately, the sides, the east sign and the rear sign, for multiple reasons. So if you make a motion, please make sure that you keep them separately.
Aaron, I've been struggling with it myself because I know the state mandates that we have to find a practical difficulty. And to me, it makes sense to have a larger sign for visibility, but I'm struggling finding that same practical difficulty. And I want to help any business out that I can in our community, especially, in tough times. But I want to find something to hang my hat on.
Yeah, I would concur. I guess that's where I'm seeing the side sign. I feel there is something there. If there was a sign that was larger there when they purchased the property, I think that might be something. If the board chose, to me, that might be valid enough for that side sign.
I would make the motion on the side sign because of the previous sign being there. I would think that they would have a practical difficulty and reasonable expectation that they could put a sign of that size there. I'm in favor of doing that, making that motion.
Okay, so just to clarify the motion, you're making a motion to approve the variance request for the side sign to the size as requested, based upon the fact that there was a previous sign prior to purchase that had been in existence in that location.
You put it much better than I can. Yes.
Just want to make sure I understood it. Is there
Yes.
support for that motion?
Support.
Support by Ms. Lawson.
Vice Lawson.
Okay, very good. I'm going to call the roll. As a note, I'm going to be leaving off member Coster's name because he had mentioned that he has a potential conflict on this issue, which as a note would mean for the board members that because we're going to be operating with 4 members on this vote and we have 5 members present, that the majority of the entire board will have to vote to approve. So we would need 3 votes for a positive or for an approval. That being said, I'm going to call the roll. Mr. Piper,
Yes.
Ms. Lawson,
Yes.
Ms. Posey, Ms. Posey, are you there? She was having audio issues earlier, and actually, she is here, and she needs to be unmuted. Christy, can you hear us? Bear with us just a second. There you are, Christy. Can you hear us? Yep,
Okay.
there you are.
Yep, I sent you a message that I was still locked out for some reason.
Sorry,
But my vote is yes.
Okay, very good. I'm glad that you were able to hear all the deliberations. You're okay?
Yep, I
Okay.
can hear everything, but I couldn't talk.
Okay, very good. Sorry about, well,
Preferred
actually,
by
it
some, maybe.
wasn't very good, but I'm glad we got you back in. All right, Ms. Posey voted yes. I'm voting yes as well. That motion passes unanimously 4-0. Before we go on to another potential motion, Ms. Posey, did you have any questions for the petitioner or for Mr. Box?
No, I'm good. Thank you for asking, though.
Okay, it looks like Mike has a question. Mike, go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify a couple of things. One is, I look back, I have the original drawings. It was from 2008 is when the bids were put in for bids on that original piece, just to clarify that. And then the other item on the rear signage. So the challenge with us with the rear sign with a 4 square foot size, that's basically a 2x2 sign. It's like a stop sign. So you can imagine the credit union has the sign that we use is the same we use for every branch. And this would be like the 18th branch, I believe, somewhere right around there for the credit union. And so it's their brand, how they market themselves, and able to try to attract new members, obviously. And like, with this being an outlot and drives around the all side, I know the way the ordinance is written, if you're on a major street, you get so much signage. In this case, it's a little unique because the drives are around the site that really aren't frontage, but they're drives nevertheless for cars to go back and forth. So, I mean, it just, if we can't have maybe as large of a sign, maybe there's some in between size that would be more appropriate, but allow them to still have some way to get their branding out there to the public. Whether it's just the logo part or something, but just a 2x2 is really not practical for a sign on a building. You know, nobody really is going to see that.
And Mike, I hear what you're saying, and I think the board hears what you're saying. I'd give you two things that I just want to mention. The first one is I think the intent of that portion of the ordinance is to make sure that there is a directional sign in the rear of a building that's principally only having employees go in the back. So as I read it, the intent is not for it to be an advertising sign, which is obvious by the size that's allowed. As I mentioned earlier, I think that's something that on the planning commission that we want to encourage more of, the ability to have outlots used within some of the areas in the parking space. I'll tell you for myself, I can't speak for the board. I hear what you're saying. It makes sense. I don't see the practical difficulty that we can use, but I will tell you that if this variance gets denied, I have a portion during planning commissioners' comments at our planning commissions, and our next one is in a week and a half, 2 weeks. It's something I'll mention. I think it would be something that we need to address at the legislative level to look at that, because it seems like it doesn't make much sense to encourage a use but not have our ordinance match up to it. So I don't see the ordinance allowing it, just my thing, but I'd say if we don't go in that direction, it's certainly something that I intend to pursue, because I think it makes sense, reasonably makes sense to be able to allow that in certain situations. So I hear what you're saying. Just want to make sure I am as straightforward with you of where we are and what we're looking at. So,
and I appreciate that. I mean, just the only other thing I can add is obviously for the credit union, it's about attracting new business.
Yep.
And obviously signage is an important aspect of that, so people know they're there.
And yes.
You know, and to keep them obviously in business, which we all want to have a viable building and have it occupied, and you know, helping the community out, especially a financial institution. So, you know, that's kind of the thinking behind us, and that is, you know, quite a bit of a pretty good elevation back there. So the sign is not overwhelming to the elevation of that part. And the side entrance it's usually left open, so members can come in that way too if they have to, you know, park and want to walk in that way, or walk over from the mall, from the strip mall. You know, they can do that. So while it's employee, not necessarily just for employees, they do leave it open during the business.
No, and that's understood. I think I'm more speaking to what I believe the ordinance was written with the intention of, which is why it has the size limitations on it. That it does. But,
Okay.
very good. Is there any questions for either of the petitioners before we go? Motion here. Hearing none, and assuming we have all of our board members able to speak.
Aaron?
Yes, Josh.
We had talked earlier about the sign on the east side and why it may not have gotten a variance the first time around. And we had spoken earlier today as well about the fact that we had a number of different people look at the wording of the ordinance, and it's very possible that the same
someone read it incorrect. Yeah,
read it differently and interpreted it differently earlier today, and we thought actually maybe a variance wasn't even needed because they were seeing that drive aisle as a road, not as a driveway. I will say that it's likely that's what happened with the Chase sign and why it was there and did not need a variance last time. And I'll point out that there is a drive aisle on the backside of the building too. And as you pointed out, I guess the meaning of the ordinance is likely for an employee entrance or some of those smaller strip plazas that have a very small rear entrance for some rear parking. Um, Similar to things like roundabouts, things like we just had in indoor parking facility as part of a building. There are
Things we don't have accounted for in the ordinance.
so in some ways, I would say there may be a practical difficulty in that they're proposing something that our ordinance wasn't written
To handle.
So I just wanted to point that out.
Interesting point. Very good. Any other questions or comments from the board?
Mr. Chairman, this is Chrissy Posey. I just want to say that I agree with Mr. Bach's comments. You know, as Mr. Piper had indicated, it's a struggle to review this, and you know, our job is to base our decision on a practical difficulty, and often people just want us to be reasonable, which we understand. But although I think their argument is reasonable, after hearing what Mr. Bach said, I think that we can justify, in a sense, a practical difficulty, which would eliminate setting precedent for someone to argue differently. So I appreciate Mr. Bach's comments. I found them to be helpful.
So, Ms. Posey, just to clarify, in your understanding, the practical difficulty is the fact that there is a maneuvering lane directly on two sides of this building, essentially creating a building with a road on three sides that require visibility and signage on all three sides.
As Mr. Piper said earlier, you do a fine job repeating that.
Yeah. Well, it's easier to say at the same time. And I was watching the meeting last night. I was trying to take direction from our new treasurer.
Yes, that's what I was trying to say.
Okay. Well, good. All that said, is there any motions on this item?
Okay, I will make this motion to approve this because I will agree with the points that Mr. Box stressed to us. I think the fact that there's a road on three sides does create that practical difficulty that we can approve this measure.
All right, motion by.
Posey will support.
I think I heard Miss Posey's name first. I think I'm gonna go with Miss Posey because I heard her name first. I think that's what I heard. Motion by Mr. Piper, support by Miss Posey. Is there any discussion on this motion before we vote on it? I just have one comment in that I do find this is something that makes practical sense. I think that we need to address the ordinance behind it, because if we just go on this by practical difficulty, we're probably going to back ourselves into a corner quickly. So just want to make that comment. With that, I am going to call the roll unless there's any other discussion. No other discussion. I'm going to call the roll. Mr. Piper.
Yes.
Ms. Posey.
Yes.
Ms. Lawson.
Yes.
Mr. DeCoster is not voting on this. Mr. Tuckfield votes yes. That motion passes 4-0. The variance is approved. Thank you for the petitioners. Thank you for bearing with us, and I hope the business does well. We appreciate the work in the township and the business being here. It makes the place a better place to live.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your thoughts and your discussion.
Thank you. All right. With that, we are going to move on to the next item. I got to rearrange my agenda here so I have it in front of me. Next item is item 6B. This is a variance from the zoning ordinance section 10.2106E. This would be on the north side of 23 Mile Road, east of the future Garfield Road. The permanent parcel number is 0817300001. Ryan Companies is the petitioner. And I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Box to walk us through an outline of it.
Thank you, Mr. Tuckfield. This property is on 23 Mile on the north side of 23, immediately east of future Garfield. This facility, this is a very large parcel, and this facility is proposed to only be constructed on the front portion of this parcel. On the rear portion of this parcel, there is a very large wooded wetland area that requires some severe mitigation if it were even allowed to have any development on by Eagle. And as due to the fact that this is a industrial zoned parcel and rear side of that abuts a residential parcel. There is a requirement for a 100-foot setback for any building, as well as a masonry wall with a 50-foot landscape buffer between a 25-foot landscape buffer between the masonry wall and any parking areas. There is 700 feet that's going to be left over of wooded wetlands between this facility and the neighboring residential. And due to the fact that there's a lot of wetlands to the rear portion, they are seeking a variance to not have to construct this masonry wall, which, as I said, would require a significant amount of mitigation if it would even be allowed to be built by Eagle.
All right, thank you, Mr. Box. I believe we have the petitioner here. I believe Kyle is here as the representative of the petitioner. Kyle, do you have any comments you wanted to add on this item?
Yeah, sure. Just want to walk through, again, Kyle Schott with Ryan Companies. If I could share my screen. It's just going to be a reflection of the documents that the board has received.
Should be good. And Kyle, I forgot to ask you, but if you could also add your address for the record, I'd appreciate it.
Yes, Kyle Schott, 584 Branford Lane, Geneva, Illinois.
Very good. Thank you, Kyle. And your screen is sharing.
All right. So you should be seeing our site plan. And what we're showing here, first, and I'll zoom in, this dashed red line is the approximate limits of the wooded wetland area on our sites. Everything north of this, plan north, as well as physical north, is wooded wetland. And we've done what I think is a very good job of making sure that we are not impacting any of that high quality regulated wooded wetland in our site design. Because of the process and of going through Michigan Eagle to get that approved, and the fact that our wetland consultant found that it'd be highly unlikely that we'd get any impact to that wetland approved. That said, what we're also showing is a 740 foot distance from the most northern portion of our site to our northern property line. Just illustrating the distance between the large distance between any activity on our site and our property line. As you can see, there's an additional distance north of our property line to any residential. So we are requesting a variance to remove the screen wall requirements for two reasons. First, the practicality matter that the first petitioner had talked about. The practicality is that there's a large distance, about 11.5 acres of regulated wetlands between the residential parcels and our own. And then the issue, in terms of a hardship, is the fact of going through Michigan Eagle and going through their process to get any type of construction through this wooded wetland approved. We see that as highly unlikely. Spending time, effort, and money to go through that process to install a wall that we don't necessarily see a benefit to. We see more as a detriment to a wooded wetland area being removed for the installation of a wall. So with those two reasons, we're seeking variance. And I have additional documents here on, the elevations of the building, and just so you know what, the height of the building and what it will look like in terms of, what neighboring parcels may see. But I'll open it up to questions at this point.
Very good. Thank you. Is there any questions for the petitioner?
I have one quick question.
Go ahead, Dave.
With regards to the wooded wetlands, is this something that is ever going to be buildable? Can this wetlands be transferred to another location? I don't know exactly how all that works, but is this a permanent wetland and can it ever be built upon?
You know, I would have to defer to our wetland consultant for that. What we've been told is that it's unlikely that it's buildable. If it is, there could be significant costs in terms of relocating wetlands that may make it unbuildable just from a financial perspective. For us, we saw it as a timing issue to the development, a cost issue, as well as just a environmental issue to dealing with this. So from our perspective, we saw that as unbuildable. In the future, another developer or another property owner may feel different and able to go through that process. But I can't say with any certainty, but I would want to defer to a wetland consultant to firmly answer that.
And obviously my fear is that if we're replacing the masonry wall with 740 feet of distance, if this parcel gets split and so it does ever get built out, now is there still a responsibility to put a wall up, or is our issuing a variance going to supersede the need for a wall in the future? So that was my only concern, really.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Box, you might have an answer to this, and this is potentially one of the legal questions. I don't know how far we're going to have to run with this, but at the point that a lot gets split, does that sever the variance to the land? Do you know? I know we discussed this on something last year. I don't know if you were with us at the time. My memory was that it doesn't. Like when the property is split, it becomes a new parcel, and the new parcel does not carry the variance with it. Do you know if that's accurate?
I think that is correct. I'm not 100% sure. I was not with you when you talked about that. I would say, I think Mr. Schott is correct in that it's highly unlikely. Sure, somebody could in the future come in and you're allowed to buy, into a banked wetland process elsewhere and then remove these wetlands. But as Kyle pointed out, the financial feasibility of that is extremely unlikely that anyone would ever want to pay the amount of money that would be required to then remove these wetlands to buy into a bank somewhere else. But I think to the point of a variance, the fact that a variance could be granted to not build the wall, would it carry forward with the parcel should someone in the future decide to come in and build on these wetlands? If it were to split, I think at that point the variance would go away. I'm not 100% certain on that, but I do think that's a fair point in that if in fact a variance is granted, that it should be conditioned on the fact that area is not developed, and should that area be developed, variance would then need to be considered.
So we can, you're basically, what you're saying is we can do a conditional approval on the variance based on what you're saying there.
I believe so.
I thought we weren't allowed to put conditions on there. Only the petitioner could offer to put a condition on there. That was my understanding of the rule.
Well, I'm offering.
Yeah, I was just, Mr. Piper, I was going to agree with you on that statement, but the petitioner can offer to include that with the request. But I just real quick would like to mention too, I believe we've had another project that involved wetlands, a similar situation. And as both Mr. Box and Kyle has mentioned, the financial extreme cost is very unlikely for someone to do that. And that was the same case scenario in the other project. That's all I have.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Posey. Mr. DeCosta, I don't want to speak through you. Did you have anything else on this?
Not at this time, no.
Okay, very good. I did have a question for Kyle and potentially Josh. And this is something I feel like I should know, but I don't, so I'm going to ask the question. What defines this as wetlands? is it the topographical nature of it? Is it defined by the state? If it's defined by the state, is it a certain area? Is it expected to be wetlands because of the area it is? What causes it to be wetlands in this case?
So I have Josh Mannion with us today, our civil engineer. I think he would be able to explain it a little bit more succinctly than I could. So I'd like to defer to him if he's still on the line.
He is, and I believe he's unmuted as well. Josh, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you. This is Josh Mannion with Progressive AE. We're the civil engineers working on this project. And I've been in close communication with our wetland consultants. So we've got a team of wetland consultants that have gone out, and they go in the field and walk the entire site, and they delineate the wetlands based on a number of factors. Plant type is I think, the largest factor. Soil is also considered as well. If it's a hydric soil, it's wetland. But the biggest factor is really if it's a wetland plant. There's a large list of plant life that is a wetland plants. And another thing that sort of makes this high quality is that it's a wooded wetland. There's wetlands that are in woods and wetlands that are more of a field wetland. Field wetlands, if you run into those are generally considered by Eagle to be a little bit lower quality. And Eagle's more likely to permit those. When you get into a wooded wetland like this is a high quality wetland in their mind. So they're much less likely to do any permitting for this. But it is a field delineation with someone walking the site and observing the plant life and the soils there.
So Josh, if I could, so your consultant goes out there, they observe the property, and based on that, you have an understanding of what Eagle is likely to do if they observe the property, and it's your responsibility, if you think it might be wetlands, to talk to them, and then they go through the permit process and determine exactly what is wetland and what they want you to protect. Is that more or less?
Yeah, I can add a little more detail to the process there. So what we do is our wetland consultant first goes out on the site, and they will go out and flag. They'll go out and tie flags all around the property at the edge of the wetlands. And what they do then is, after they get all the flags placed on the site, they will go with a GPS and pick up locations. Then they essentially have a map of where the wetlands are on the site. Once they have that done, they will submit a pre-application request to Eagle. And that's then a site visit where you'll have a couple of members from Eagle come out and walk the site.
And they verify that.
Our consultants, and they'll walk and verify and say, yep, this looks like it's accurate. If there's wetlands in question, then we'll need to take another step for a more detailed wetland identification program. But if it's pretty apparent, Eagle will generally say, yep, your delineations look good, go ahead and proceed with your permit application. And then we proceed to the permit stage, where this one, there were some field wetlands where the building is, and that's in the process of being permitted right now. But everything that's wooded, they said, yeah, you don't want to go after that. that's a quality wetland.
So and so that's where the line on our drawing that we have that Kyle screen shared with us, that's the preliminary placement of the wetland by your consultant that would, if you were to try to build in there or get a permit, would be submitted to Eagle, who would then determine if that's where they truly believed that it was, and then it would become wetlands, and you'd have to react to it in that way.
Well, to pause there, we had to submit a permit to Eagle for
Okay.
our site plan. So they were part of this delineation. They're aware of it. It was their recommendation not to build in that area. So we are being permitted currently through Eagle with the impact to the wetlands that we are in fact impacting, the lower quality wetlands.
All right, and I'm trying to understand this because and so the board understands. I'm looking at we potentially have two different practical difficulties here. There's the practical difficulty of the wetlands, meaning you can't build on them because Eagle won't let you, and there's the practical difficulty of needing to put a wall in when your building is 800 feet away from the residential area. Practically speaking, I understand that 800 feet away from the residential area, it makes a reasonable buffer and there's trees in the way, but I feel like the wetlands is a more compelling practical difficulty. And I just want to make sure that I understand it correctly, the way it goes. So I think that answered all my questions, and I appreciate you distinguishing the difference for me. It's not something I'm overly familiar with, but I think it makes a difference in this particular case. That said, is there any other questions from the board before I take this out to the public?
I do have one more question, if you don't mind.
Go ahead, Dave.
Just possibly out of curiosity, your survey of the wetlands, did you guys just survey your property, or does this extend into neighboring properties and maybe to the property north of you? That being said, would the construction of a new masonry wall fall within this wooded wetland area?
Yeah, I can answer that. The wetlands survey went to the north property line, and that's basically where it ended. And the wetlands at the north property line, they're there, and they run. If you follow just that line of the north property line, it covers probably, I'd estimate about half of that property line. So because they didn't go further to the north, but it's plenty wide at that property line, so it's highly likely that the wetlands continue further to the north into that area that's wooded, which is quite likely why that remained a wooded area in that residential development, why it wasn't actually developed.
So we could also most likely use a practical difficulty of building a masonry wall within the wooded wetlands.
Yes.
And Dave, I just follow up with that, and I believe I talked with Josh last week. He was gracious enough to allow me to walk the property prior to our site plan review for the planning commission, and I can verify that if it's a subjective or professional discernment of what is a wetland, the difference between the property on the south side of that property line and the north side of that property line, I couldn't smell, see, or feel a difference. Yeah, I would assume that if it was reviewed, it would be in the same case once they were to do it. All right. Any other questions before we take it out to the audience? Hearing none, I'm going to bring this out to the audience. If there's anyone who wishes to speak on this issue, please raise your hand digitally by hitting *9 or by hitting the hand on your app, and I will unmute you and allow you to speak once you've given your name and address for the record. We have a few members of the audience still out there. I assume they're there on this issue, so I'm just going to give them a little bit more time to make sure they have the chance to speak if they wish to do so. Mr. Box, while we're waiting, did we have any correspondence on this that we wanted to make sure that we noted at this time?
Yes, we did. We got an email from a Julie Walicki, who is a resident to the north, and she indicates that she would be in favor of having the wall, and that she can, despite the large wooded area, she says she can already see through the wooded area to the other side of the forest, and that she would hope that you would please consider enforcing this code to ensure the harmonious living for the people across the wooded area, being at ease, knowing that everything possible is being done to keep their lives and rights quiet and restful.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Box. And I'm not seeing anyone else who wants to speak in public comment. Actually, I do have one now. Mr. Gallup, I'm going to hit a button. It's going to ask you to unmute yourself, and then please.
You got me?
I did, but hang on a second because I think I muted Miss Posey at the same time. I want to make sure she has the ability here to speak. Miss Posey, can you speak? Just want to make sure we're getting you again.
Yep, I'm back now.
All right, very good. Sorry about that. Slip of the mouse there. Go ahead, Mr. Gallup, if you could state your name and address for the record and give any comments you might have.
I'm Richard Gallup, 52013 Cornerstone Court, Cobblestone Ridge. I back right up to the woods, and I agree I can see through it. The other problem is noise from what's going on in the commercial area. There are trucks backing up. You constantly hear beeping sounds from early morning to early evening, and I think it would cut down on the noise if they put up a wall. It's almost nerve-wracking to hear these constantly beeping vehicles being moved around the yard. That's my feel on it. It would block the noise.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Gallup. I appreciate your comments. I appreciate you being here this evening. Is there any other comments from the public on this matter? We've got another one. I actually might, Josh, so that I avoid muting someone who shouldn't be muted, why don't I let you do this so I don't misclick while I'm juggling things. This would be Paul and Barb. I'm going to mispronounce the last name. My apologies. Reykjavik.
Racevich.
Go ahead. Say that again.
Racevich.
Very good, Mr. Racevich. I appreciate it. If you could state your name and address for the record and give any comments you might have.
Sure, it's 52025 Cornerstone Court in the Cobblestone Ridge condos. And just to my own clarification, where would this wall be built? I'm having trouble discerning on the map where it was going to go. Would it go on the furthest north lot line, or would it be, which it couldn't go because of the wetlands, where would that exactly be built?
Just to clarify for this issue, I believe that per ordinance, it would have to be built on the lot line, which I believe means that some 10, 15 feet of the woodlands would have to be removed from the lot line so that machinery could get back there so a wall could be built. But it would need, per ordinance, unless we grant an additional variance, it would have to be built on the lot line.
Okay, that clarifies it for me. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you. Any other questions from the public? Seeing none, I'm going to, oh, actually, we do have another one. Mr. Ray, looks like you'd like to speak.
Yes, Larry Ray.
Yeah, if you can state your name and address for the record, Mr. Ray, I appreciate it.
Larry Ray, 52026 Southview Ridge.
Go ahead.
Cobblestone. And can you show that graphic again where they were describing where they were putting the wall?
Kyle,
where the lot line was?
Yeah, so this is the lot line where the mouse is going. That's the lot line. It's roughly parallel to where the back clear edge of the industrial portion to the east is. It just carries along that lot line where that is.
Okay, I'm not, because most of that is wetland, but that where they're drawing that line, there's a good part in there that's national wetland. So can they even do that?
Well, I believe the petitioner and our staff has indicated that it may be possible to apply for a permit, but it's unknown if they would be allowed to do it at this point.
Okay, so they're not considering putting any kind of wall down by where the broken red line is?
That is not their request, no.
Okay. Yeah, and I'm still, like, we can hear noise now, well, especially since all the leaves are gone, but even prior to all the leaves being gone, we could hear a lot from where we are.
Understood, and thank you for your comments, Mr. Ray. We appreciate you being here this evening. Any other comments? Any other comments from the public? And I almost moved down too quickly last time, so I'm going to give it another little chunk here. All right, still seeing none. I'm going to bring it back to the board. Does the board have any further questions or comments for Mr. Boxer, the petitioner?
Just one for the petitioner. I spoke earlier regarding some conditions that the petitioner may want to recommend or request as part of this variance. I'm just wondering if the petitioner would be willing to make any conditions.
Yes, we'd be willing to make the condition that this variance could be negated if this northern portion was ever developed or subdivided and developed. We'd be willing to add that as a condition.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Schott. Thank you, Mr. Coster. Any other questions or comments or motions?
Did you ask for a motion? I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Mr. DeCosta. If you want to make a motion, we're good for it.
Yes, I will make a motion to eliminate the 6-foot high masonry wall based on the practical difficulty of the wetlands in the rear portion of this property, also including the conditions made by the petitioner that if the rear end of the property is ever sold and or developed, that this variance would be null and void.
Could Mr. DeCosta, if I could, and I should have verified this, Mr. Schott, obviously, if I could, we need to take a second on this before I ask the question. Is there support for that motion?
Support by
So-
Slauson.
by Ms. Lawson. So there's a motion by Mr. Coster, support by Ms. Lawson. Mr. Schott, I just wanted to check, can you clarify the extent of development that your exclusion would be used by? In other words, you are not saying that if you were ever to make a site plan that it would require this, that you are referring to developing north of the line that you were already planning on developing. Can you clarify that just so we can make sure we understand what you're offering here?
Yes, if we were to develop any of the property within the regulated wetlands as shown on the drawing, so north of the red dashed line.
Okay, so the condition would be if and the condition you're giving as representative of the property owner that would carry with this variance that runs with the land is that if anything was developed within the area that is considered regulated wetlands, that the wall would then be required again.
Yes, anything developed, well, one thing I would state is, no, that's it. That's good. I'm good with that.
If you have anything secondary, we want to make sure we're working with you, but we also want to make sure we follow this correctly too.
Secondary to that would be if there was some sort of extension of Leone Drive not completed by our, if it was completed by the county or the township, not by us as developer or property owner. If it was, done by a governmental entity, that to me, I don't see as development. So I just want that placed there. Or that's a thought of mine.
So if a non-property owner were to build a road on your property, you would not want to have this variance be declared null so that you would then have to build a road or a wall rather.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. DeCosta, is that clear to you? Are you okay? Continue your motion with that clarification attached to it?
I guess my only concern is, has there been talks? Is there any, do you know of any plans in the future for anybody to develop Leone Drive? I mean, you wouldn't have to sell the property to maybe to have someone build that so you could sell in the future. Do you know if there's any current plans to develop that as a road?
No, I mean, based off of our site plan approval, no, there's not. And just for the reason of the wetland impact.
I guess I am okay with that language, knowing that obviously if that road gets built, it will spur further development, which would require then the wall. So
yes.
Okay.
I can add to that as well that we are in the process of removing the requirement for Leone Drive to be connected through these wooded wetlands from the master plan at this time. So, it should not be constructed if that amendment to the master plan goes through.
Yeah.
Okay.
It is there, Mr. DeCosta, to your concern, and we've talked about this before. It's this is a good sized development. I think the township as a whole is trying to make sure that we are good business partners and good partners with our community. I still have concerns that it may be possible or needed at some point to put Leone Drive through. It may not be practicable. We may not be allowed to, but if we are allowed to, I don't want to exclude the possibility from it happening. But I think, as the motion is stated, probably is a fair balance. If the if the petitioner or the applicant or the owner of the property does not put the road in, somebody else does, and they're being forced to at that point. So, all right, very good. So we have a motion by Mr. DeCoster. DeCoster, you are good. Continuing it. Ms. Lawson, are you still okay with your support?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Then if there is no further discussion, I am going to call the roll. Mr. DeCoster,
Yes.
Ms. Lawson,
Yes.
Ms. Posey,
Yes.
Mr. Piper,
Yes.
Mr. Tuckfield votes yes. That motion passed 5-0. All right, thank you, Mr. Schott and Mr. Mannion for coming in. Thank you for all the residents who attended. We appreciate taking the time this evening and being part of the process.
Thank you.
With that, we're going to move on to item 7, which is old business. I don't believe we have any old business this evening. Mr. Box, is there anything you wanted to bring up here?
There is no old business.
Okay. Then I will move on to public comments, item 8. This is general public comments from the public. I'm being redundant here, but if you have anything you wish to speak, please raise your hand digitally and we will unmute you and you will have a chance to speak on general comments. And again, to do that, please hit *9 on your phone or raise your hand digitally on the app. Seeing none, I'm going to move on to item 9, which is ZBA member comments. Are there any comments from the members this evening?
I just have
Mr.
one.
Chair, I would just like to make a comment if I could. This is Christy Posey. Josh,
ahead, Ms.
could
Posey.
could you make a note to review that ordinance with regards to that item with the signage that we talked about, so that it is on our radar to review sooner than later?
Yes, we, Dave Skirdo and myself have actually been working quite a bit on the sign ordinance, and that should be moving forward in the near future to seek approval for an amendment to our ordinance. Yes, we are addressing that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, and as a longer term thing, Christy, the planning commission, the sign ordinance has been something that's needed work for a while. So
Yeah.
it already needed it. I think this is a good thing to add in, particularly with our want to make sure that we give people the ability to do outlots in large parking lots. So, all right, Mr. Was it? I'm sorry, I cut you off there. Was there anything else, Ms. Posey?
No, thank you. That was it.
Okay, Mr. DeCoster, anything for you?
I just want to say thank you mainly to the old board of trustees for the reappointment to the ZBA, myself and Piper, as well as I believe Clerk Posey also been reappointed for another term. So appreciate it. I like the role that we serve, and thanks for the support.
Very good. Thank you, Mr.
My
DeCoster.
pleasure.
Mr. Piper, Ms. Lawson, any comments this evening?
I just want to tell everybody to say, oh, go ahead. Go ahead, please.
No, I'm all set. Nope.
Oh, I just want to tell everybody to stay safe. I know this COVID, when it first came out back in February and March, I didn't know anyone that was affected by it. And it seems, I don't know if it's because more people are being tested, but I have known several people lately, including a resident that recently died that was a good friend of mine from COVID. So everyone, please stay safe. Do what you can to stay safe. We have a member of our historical commission that was hospitalized for 5 days with it, and fortunately he's on the mend, but I hope everyone stays healthy.
Thank you. Thank you for the cautionary words, Mr. Piper. And I think actually we've had multiple members of the Board of Trustees who've gotten it as well. I believe 2 of the newly elected members are in recovery and still not all the way back as far as their voice and coughs go. So good words of caution. My only comment tonight would be to echo Mr. DeCoster. Mr. Piper, Mr. DeCoster were reappointed. Appreciate having them back. You know, we were a pretty green board 2 years ago. We had a lot of turnover in the course of 1 year. I think we've gelled really well. I think it's been a good couple of years, and I really appreciate everybody's part in doing that. You know, it's different than some other boards. The ZBA is more of a board of equals. We don't have a supervisor. We don't have different people, and I think we very much operated that in that way, and I appreciate it. I think it's worked very well. along those lines, one thing I just want to remind everyone is that our next meeting will have officer elections. I know I've pushed this behind the scenes and I've gotten resistance a few years, but I'm the chairperson, but I'm more than happy to step aside if anybody wants to take over the role. I know Dave's been good enough to be the vice chair. We didn't have him chair any meetings this year, which we did last year, although it's been kind of a strange year. But if anybody wishes to do a different role, you know, I'm sitting in this role, but I'm more than willing to move aside. I think it's good to spread things around and to not let things go stagnant. So, you know, we have a month before the next election, but if anybody wishes to change their roles and would be interested in being the chair, by all means, consider it and let me know what you're thinking in that regard. So, with that. Those are all my comments. I will take it to Mr. Box, item 10 for planning director comments. Do you have anything this evening for us, Mr. Box?
Yeah, a couple things. First, you may have more than a month before your election. We have no items, it looks like, for the next meeting. So
Okay.
it's possible there's a few days left where we could still meet all of the advertising deadlines, but at this point, I'm guessing that there will not be a January meeting. That being said, we obviously have video up tonight for some of us, which is a step in the right direction. Those of you who have watched the board meetings, the last few meetings, they're at Town Hall, moving back to a little bit of normalcy, I guess you would say. And we have asked to do the same with the ZBA and Planning Commission, and we were granted approval to do that with the recommendation that we do some type of a dry run. So whether there's maybe, if there's not a meeting in January, maybe we could all still meet on that day and do a dry run, or try to schedule a time where everyone can come in and try that out, just to make sure that there's no hiccups. So when we have to a live meeting, everything runs smoothly and we don't have to try to solve problems on the fly.
Mr. Box, would we, if we were all there at one time, would we need to advertise that?
That's a good question. If we're meeting quorum, you know, to do a dry run, I don't know, Clerk Posey, did you guys do something similar for the board? And if so,
we did it in stages. So that's, we did it at different times. So there was 3 of us down there, and then some of the trustees came in at a different time. The issue with a quorum, though, is as long as you're not discussing and deciding any items of business, you can be in the same room at the same time.
Okay. Which we would not, and we would obviously state that. Very good. And I'm good with that, Mr. Box. Obviously, as Mr. Piper indicated, you know, even if we weren't calling it a pandemic, obviously there's people along the spectrum of how much they're concerned about this. At the very least, it's a very bad disease season, and we want to be very careful to make sure that we don't pass anything on. So I think obviously we want to take all due care in moving forward. But yeah, I think to serve the interests of the township and the residents, I think we operate better when we can see each other. And I think it's important for us, and it's important for the residents who have to have confidence in the deliberations of bodies when they're watching them. So I'm for it, and if you can let us know how you want to proceed, I'm more than happy to do whatever I can to help facilitate it.
Okay.
Chairman Tuckfield, if I could just mention to those of you, because you can't actually see it in the meeting videos for the Board of Trustees, there is plexiglass that separates all of our seats, and we are spread out to where we are 6 feet apart. So 2 of our board members, their desks have been set up in front of the panel. So it is staged to practice social distancing, just so you know.
And also, it's easier with 5 board members as opposed to 7. So, very good. Thank you, Ms. Posey. Mr. Piper, do you have anything there?
No, my screen kind of froze up. I could see myself moving, everybody else, the sound and everything else went away. I'm like, oh, what's going on here?
Yes. The fun of 2020. I still think we're going to remember this year as you're muted. That's going to be the byline. All right, Mr. Box, do you have any other comments for us this evening?
That was it.
Okay. Well, that takes us on to item 11, which is adjournment. Anybody want to make a motion for adjournment?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Very good. Mr. DeCoster, motion by Mr. Coster. Is there support?
Support by Slauson?
Support by Ms. Slauson, and I'm going to call the roll. Mr. DeCoster,
Yes.
Ms. Slauson,
Yes.
Ms. Posey,
Yes.
Mr. Piper,
Yes.
Mr. Tuckfield votes yes. We are adjourned at a late 8:11 p.m. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.